From the brash upstarts O'Keefe and Joye blasting white-bread American heartthrobs off the stage at an old tin shed at Rushcutters Bay. Stomping surfers and rockers riding Thorpe's baby boomer beat of the 60s. A wave of migrant Aussies turning the pop world on its head, to homegrown Australian superstars emerging to take their place in rock's pantheon. Think Chisel, Easybeats, Loved Ones, Oils, Aztecs, AC/DC, In Excess, Angels, Men at Work, Skyhooks, Clapton, Silverchair, Jet, Wolfmother, and the sheer impact of Australian rock music begins, and I emphasise begins, to come into perspective. Australian rock music changed us, or marked our change, in a mere 4 decades, from iron ore, superfine merino wool, Sunburn and Don Bradman, to a sophisticated culture offering the world our artists, writers and filmmakers, but most significantly, our musicians. In Britain, they take their rock music seriously, from the pedestrian crossing outside Abbey Road Studios in London's St John's Wood to Waterloo Station where Terry met Julie, to the Chelsea drugstore where Mick met Mr Jimmy, to the windswept railway platform in Widnes where Paul Simon penned Homeward Bound. Britain's rock heritage is signposted, written up in tourist guides, celebrated. I think it's about time that we did the same. Where do we start our pilgrimage, and how much can we hope to find intact? Not a lot, I fear, which really does make the matter rather urgent. Australian music pathways are incredibly divergent, and all our major cities, particularly Melbourne, can argue for their share of sacred rock sites. But I'm starting in Sydney for no better reason than it's where my rock music world began, where I cut my chops as a fan, as a promoter, as a manager, a writer, and God help me, rock brain of the universe. Sydney is an ever-evolving city. It's a developer's city. The only thing constant seems to be change. So the chance of actually finding these precious places where we went and experienced and saw and listened is increasingly difficult, because what was is now a flyover, a block of flats, a swish new hotel. A certain amount of imagination and recollection needs to be applied. Billy Thorpe was right. It's about time someone took it seriously and made a definitive, or the start of a definitive record, so that when a son or daughter says, "Dad, did you ever see Cold Chisel play?" he can say, "Not only did I see them play, but I can take you for breakfast at Sweethearts." In the 50s and particularly the 60s, for anyone seeking entertainment, seeking a great night out, all roads led to King's Cross. Well, actually one road in particular. It was called William Street, and it was the wide promenade up to this slightly bohemian and eccentric area of venues and bars and people that you really didn't get to see in the suburbs. Now, halfway up William Street was one of the great draw cards of the late 60s, the Whiskey A Go-Go. That's where Max Merritt and his Meteors held court for all the visiting R&R servicemen coming in from the Vietnam War. It was a world unto itself. But if there is a site one can reasonably assert is the birthplace of Australian beat music in Sydney, it is, or was, this block on Darlinghurst Road, King's Cross, currently occupied by the Crest Hotel. It began its existence as the 5,000-seat King's Cross Theatre in the 20s, but by 1962 it was throbbing to the beat of the stomp, and a rising young legend, nay a titan, the much-missed Billy Thorpe.
This photo was taken here.
Now, how do you work out your eye line?
When you came out of the front door of Surf City, when I looked across the street, that used to be the Kellett Club. The Golden Nugget where all the crims and the coppers drank together. They used to hang their guns behind the bar up there.
Right.
And we came out of Surf City, and that was the first thing. But the doors ran all the way along here, because it was a huge theatre. And as you can see, these glass doors, they continued all the way down the street. And Surf City went up to about where the sports bar is. It was the end of Surf City. It was the end of the King's Cross Theatre.
On a Friday and Saturday night, how many people would gather at Surf City? I mean,
over a weekend, and because we used to play here and so did like Ray Brown, the Whispers, and a number of bands, it was so popular that we were putting about between 15 and 20,000 people through here in a weekend.
Sheesh.
And every weekend, and Saturday afternoons, there'd be Saturday afternoons, and we used to do lunchtime shows here where kids would come up from the city and had buses coming up from the city, so you'd have 1,000 people here at lunchtime.
Did it build really quickly? I mean,
yeah.
when you started here,
extraordinarily fast. I mean, we came here. This was a surf joint. It was called Surf City. It was, and it was the waning days of the surfing era, and bands like the Atlantics were playing here, and Roland Storm and the Statesmen, and etc.
Chris Hall and the Torquays.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so Harrigan, who owned the place, I was staying around the corner. I auditioned here, and with a young surf band called the Aztecs.
Yeah.
And
formerly the Sierras.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And it just turned from a surf crowd into a pop crowd. It was empty for a long time. For the first 4 or 5 months, it was 3 men and a dog, and then all of a sudden that baby boomer thing hit, and within by Christmas of 1963. You couldn't move. You literally couldn't move.
So were they mostly kids from the suburbs? Were they flooding in from all over
kids,
Sydney?
Yeah, kids from... Well, it was neutral territory. So, I mean, in those days, kids from Pattie didn't talk to kids from Surrey Hills. They fought,
Yeah.
Working class kids, lower working class kids. And the gangs violently fought. I mean, really fought, And this was neutral ground where kids from Redfern and Mascot and Bondi and whatever came, as well as, not only that, but it was... they didn't have a name. I just call them the Night Trippers or something in my book, but they weren't Sharpies or mods or anything like that, but they were a definite group with a definite dress code, as opposed to the surfing kids who were bare feet and jeans, right? But here they didn't clash. Here they shared the dance floor, shared the music, and that, I think, contributed to this is the most significant venue Australia really ever had.
Obviously.
It was the turning point, and it just happened to be in Sydney at that point. I could have been in Melbourne, but it happened to be here. So Surf City then became a venue. The two main venues in Sydney were here and the Beach House in Elizabeth Street, that was also owned by John Harrigan. We opened that as well. So, really significant, because what it also did was it contributed to the economy of the Cross. There really was a sense of extended family here. I wrote about it in Sex and Thugs and Rock and Roll, where when the neon, I call it the neon door, when the neon door opened at 6 o'clock, I mean, I used to love getting up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and wandering up to the Cross and tootling around in Surf City ready for that night's gig, and then standing outside and looking across Darlinghurst Road and we were literally watching the sun go down. It sounds romantic, but in summer it was, and the swallows used to fly past and head down there. The neon would come on, and then out would come the strippers, and then out would come the crew, I call them the night shifters, and there was a line over which the Straits didn't cross. I mean, if you were a part of that community, you were a part of that community. My apartment was robbed in 1964, and I lived just down the bottom of Bayswater Road, and a very discerning thief, he took like shoes that matched suits that matched ties, everything matched, and he left what he didn't like. It must have been my size, And the word went out, and 2 days later it was all put back in place.
No one articulated the relevance of our sacred rock sites better than Billy in what was sadly to be one of his last interviews. A true force of nature, he left behind not just timeless music, but in a couple of rambunctious best-selling books, his personal history of this extraordinary precinct. Next, even before the likes of Keith Moon took to hurling television sets or driving Rolls Royces into swimming pools, the mere presence of pop stars created headaches for hotel managers here in the Cross. We tracked the Stones, the Fab Four, and 2 more sacred Sydney rock sites.